Have you ever wondered why we call that delicious sausage in a bun snack a hot dog? It's one of those names that sounds so normal to us today. But if you stop to think about it, it's actually kind of strange. Why would anyone call food a dog? That sounds more like a prank than a snack. And yet, this funny, almost absurd name has stuck around for more than a century, becoming one of the most recognizable food names in the entire world. In this story, we're going to dig into the quirky history behind the question, why is it called hot dog? To answer it, we'll have to travel far back in time, meet German immigrants carrying their beloved sausages across the ocean, wander into bustling baseball stadiums filled with shouts and laughter, and even peek into the imagination of a cartoonist who may or may not have changed history with a single drawing. By the end of this journey, you'll see how what started as a simple joke, a throwaway nickname whispered on busy streets, transformed into a lasting cultural symbol, something inseparable from American traditions, holidays, and everyday life. So grab a seat, maybe even a snack, and let's dive into the curious tale of how a sausage in a bun ended up with such a peculiar name, right here on Origins of Ordinary. Before we can even begin to unravel the mystery of the name, we have to look at the food itself, the sausage. Sausages are ancient. In fact, some historians believe they go back more than 3,000 years, with early mentions found in Homer's Odyssey. The idea was beautifully simple. Take bits of meat that might otherwise go to waste, season them, tack them tightly into a casing, and suddenly you have a compact, flavorful meal that could be cooked, stored, and carried. It was efficiency and taste rolled into one. Over the centuries, this humble invention spread across cultures and continents, each region perfecting its own version. But it was in Germany that sausage-making truly reached its golden age. Towns and cities prided themselves on unique recipes, distinct blends of spices, and perfected techniques passed down through generations. Frankfurt, in particular, rose to fame in the 15th century for its beloved Frankfurter, a long, thin sausage that would one day play a starring role in the American hot dog story. Not to be outdone, Vienna offered its own variety, the Wiener, just as iconic in flavor and form. These sausages were more than just food. They were cultural staples, symbols of gatherings, festivals, and family meals. They carried identity and pride, the kind of everyday tradition that anchored communities. So, when German immigrants packed their belongings and set sail for America in the 1800s, they brought with them not only their hopes and dreams, but also the cherished taste of home in the form of sausages. This was the seed, and in the melting pot of the United States, that seed would soon find fertile ground to grow into something larger than anyone could have imagined. When German immigrants arrived in the United States during the 19th century, they carried more than just their language and traditions. They carried flavors. Among the most beloved was the sausage, a food that could be prepared quickly, sold cheaply, and eaten with joy. In bustling immigrant neighborhoods of New York, Chicago, and beyond, sausages became an instant hit. The aroma of sizzling meat drifting from pushcarts and street stands was impossible to resist. But there was a problem. Sausages, though tasty, weren't exactly easy to eat on the go. Imagine trying to walk through a crowded fairground with a greasy sausage in your hand, juices dripping everywhere. It wasn't the most practical snack for a city that thrived on speed and movement. That's when someone, history never quite recorded who, had the clever idea to slip the sausage into a sliced bun. Suddenly, this traditional German food transformed into something portable, neat, and perfect for busy streets, picnics in the park, or cheering crowds at baseball games. This simple innovation unlocked a new chapter. Sausages and buns began appearing at fairs, amusement parks, and eventually in America's favorite pastime, baseball. Vendors walking up and down stadium aisles quickly discovered that fans loved a snack they could hold in one hand while waving or clapping with the other. By the late 1800s, sausages and buns were becoming more than food. They were part of the experience. woven into the social fabric of a rapidly growing nation. At this point, though, they weren't yet called hot dogs. Depending on who was selling them, they were still Frankfurters, Franks, or Wieners. The strange, playful name we know today was still waiting to be born. And it would arrive thanks to rumors, jokes, and a little dog-shaped twist of fate. By the late 1800s, sausages and buns were already winning over the American public, but something curious was happening alongside their rise in popularity. Rumors. At the time, food safety wasn't exactly a strong point in American cities. People often wondered what butchers were really putting into their meat. Whispers began to spread that sausage makers were using scraps of questionable quality, and some even joked about the possibility of dog meat being mixed in. It was more suspicion than fact, but the joke stuck like grease on paper. That suspicion sparked a playful nickname. Because the long, thin shape of the sausages reminded people of dachshunds, the little German dogs with short legs and long bodies, vendors began to call their products dachshund sausages. It was part humor, part marketing trick, and it added a memorable flair that drew attention on busy streets. Crowds would laugh, the name would spread, and before long, the dachshund and the sausage became inseparable in the public imagination. Now combine that with another detail. The sausages were almost always served piping hot. The words hot and dachshund began to mingle in slang, and gradually people shortened the phrase into something snappier. Instead of yelling, "Get your hot dachshund sausages," street vendors found themselves simply shouting, "Get your hot dogs." At first, the phrase was informal, more of a street-level nickname than a real label. But catchy words have a way of sticking, especially when they're easy to say and fun to repeat. And hot dog was exactly that. A phrase born of suspicion, humor, and convenience that was now rolling off the tongues of hungry New Yorkers. To really understand how the phrase hot dog took root, you have to picture New York City in the late 19th and early 20th century. Baseball was exploding in popularity, and vendors saw the perfect opportunity. They roamed through the stands with trays balanced on their shoulders, shouting to fans about the sizzling sausages in fresh buns they carried. The food was cheap, filling, and easy to eat without missing a single pitch. Soon, sausages in buns became just as essential to a day at the ballpark as the crack of the bat or the roar of the crowd. It was in this lively atmosphere that one of the most famous legends was born. Around 1901, a cartoonist named Tad Dorgan was said to have attended a game at the Polo Grounds in New York. Vendors that day were yelling, "Get your red-hot dachshund sausages." Dorgan, eager to capture the scene, began sketching. But there was a problem. He didn't know how to spell dachshund. Rather than risk embarrassment, he simply wrote hot dog under his drawing. The cartoon, according to the story, struck a chord with readers and helped cement the phrase in popular use. It's a story that sounds almost too perfect, and maybe it is. Historians have never actually found that cartoon, and some argue it never existed. Yet whether true or apocryphal, the tale reflects a real trend. People were already saying hot dog because it was quick, funny, and easier than the clunky German name. The cartoonist's myth may not have created the term, but it captured the spirit of the moment, a nickname transforming into an identity. By the 1920s, the hot dog had already become a staple of American street food, but its rise to cultural icon status still needed a push. That push came from a Polish immigrant named Nathan Handwerker. In 1916, Nathan opened a small stand in Coney Island, selling hot dogs for just 5 cents, half the price of his competitors. His stand quickly drew massive crowds, not only because of the low price, but also because Nathan's sausages were genuinely delicious. What started as a modest cart soon became Nathan's Famous, the legendary brand that would help etch the hot dog into the nation's collective memory. By then, the term hot dog was no longer a playful joke whispered in the streets. It was painted boldly on signs, menus, and advertisements. Ballparks embraced it, Coney Island thrived on it, and companies began mass-producing and marketing hot dogs across the country. The once questionable nickname had transformed into the official identity of the food. But the story doesn't stop at the bun. The phrase, hot dog, leapt out of the culinary world and into everyday language. By the 1920s and 1930s, people were using it as an exclamation, a cheerful way of saying wow, or that's great. The energy of the food carried into the phrase itself, fun, casual, and bursting with enthusiasm. Over time, the hot dog became more than just a snack. It grew into a symbol of American life. It shows up at backyard barbecues, 4th of July celebrations, amusement parks, and even competitive eating contests. Few foods are so deeply tied to national identity. So the next time you bite into a hot dog, you're not just enjoying a quick meal. You're tasting centuries of history, from ancient sausages in Europe to immigrant dreams in New York. From baseball stadiums to iconic boardwalks. A joke that became a legend. A nickname that became a tradition, forever known as the hot dog.